All right, so we're recording. Welcome, folks, to our Routing Switching Essentials class meeting for the week of the 4th. Appreciate you being here. I know it's a holiday weekend, and I really appreciate you being able to come today. We're going to talk about Chapter 5, switch configuration, but before I start that, I do want to talk to you about the past 2 weeks where I've been. 2 weeks ago, I was at Skills USA in Louisville, Kentucky, and had a wonderful contest, very good students. Every year I've seen the level come up, and it's been nice to see that. So if you're not involved in Skills USA at your local area, or if you don't have it in your local area, ask around, see if you've got it in your state, if you've got it in your area. If you don't, contact me and I'll put you in touch with someone who can get you in touch with your state folks. So we were blessed at Stanley to have a student win gold in information technology, and he actually was told by Mike Myers. I don't know if you know Mike Myers, but he writes all the A+ books. And he was one of the judges for that particular contest, and Mike Myers said he would be willing to be a reference for the student. So imagine how well that will look on your resume. We had another student get bronze in telecommunication cabling, and 2 students get, he got silver in telecommunications cabling, and 2 students get bronzes in mechatronics. So really, really nice thing to get your students involved in if you don't have them involved in it. And then last week I was in Vegas at Cisco Live, which was simply phenomenal. Large amounts of information on the Internet of Things. Had a really good talk with a gentleman who worked in the power industry and how they use Cisco's devices for their SCADA controls and for controls and the setup of their security for those controls. And so just a great learning experience, and really fired me up. I was telling Chris I went and bought a whole like $300 worth of books on CCIE. To start studying for my CCIE, and I'm going to get CCNA Cyber Ops and those things too. So this really kind of fired me up. If you get a chance to go next year, it's in Orlando, Florida. If you get a chance, you need to try to go because it's well worth the money. It's expensive, but it is really, really well done and extremely informative. So just kind of throw that out there. I want to open up to see if you have any questions about the course. I know most of you have been in my courses before, so you kind of understand how these things work. Again, be aware I'm not asking you to do every single packet tracer. I would like you to do all the hands-on labs and obviously chapter exams and those. Be aware again that at the end of this particular course, you will, if you score 75 or higher on the final exam, you will qualify for a voucher, which gives you 60% off the ICND-1 test. I do suggest that since most of your students will be doing ICND-1 and ICND-2, I suggest you take those tests if you don't already have your CCNA. So be aware of that so that you can take it. And we'll talk more about that as we get closer toward the end of class. Be aware, too, I know this class official end date is August 9th. That will be the day that your Moodle access ends. It will not be the day that I turn off NetAcad or NetLab. So those 2 items will be available for you to continue to work. If you can get done by August 9th, I would really appreciate it because then it makes it easier on all of us. But if you can't, I'm not going to have a heart attack. We'll keep working. And I'm going to have my schedule for the fall posted probably early next week because of the fact that I'm technically off half a day tomorrow, but I'll be here tomorrow afternoon. But we're gonna start classes in early September. So those of you who are in Routing Switching Essentials, you'll be able to take your scaling class starting early September, and then we'll follow you up and connecting in the spring of 18 if that will work for everyone. So that's kind of the plan, and so let's get started looking at switch configurations. First off, quick question for you. What is a switch? Anybody?
A device that uses layer 2 information as forwarding decisions.
That's exactly right. So for the purposes of the CCNA, we'll go ahead and leave it at that. Most switches are considered layer 2 devices that use layer 2 information to make forwarding decisions, and that layer 2 information would be MAC addresses. They're really, I was at a conference one time and a guy kept asking the question, what is a switch, what is a switch? And obviously, Chris, your answer is correct. But he wanted someone to say that they are actually a multi-port bridge, which is what they are. You know, bridges in the old days were just a switch with 2 ports, that's all it was. It had 2 segments on it. Now we have switches that are able to do, 96 ports, 48 ports, whatever. But they do make, for the purposes of the CCNA, for the most part, they do make forwarding decisions based on layer 2. Now, there are things called layer 3 switches, which can use switch virtual interfaces, and the curriculum does talk about this, the ability to route between switch virtual interfaces. Patrick, you asked, is ICND1 the same as CCENT? Yes, ICND1 is the CCENT exam. And then the ICND2 exam is the second part, which gives you your full CCNA when you complete those two parts. So that is correct. So if I'm going to configure a switch, here's all different kinds of switches. By the way, I met a guy that just thrown out a large number of 6500 series switches. He'd actually sent them to recycling at Cisco Live, and it made me sick because it was in a local city. And I was like, please call me, because I know I've got some schools that would love to have a 6509 chassis with line cards and admin cards that they could put in the classroom and use. So hopefully that'll become, yeah, Patrick's going, heck yeah, me too. I've got one in the classroom, but I would love to have more than one. If I get my hands on them, we'll start getting those out to academies so that you can use them in your classroom. But this is an example of 6500s. Cisco's newest switch is the 6800, and they also just announced and released a Nexus 9000 series switch. I believe that was a week before Cisco Live that accessed it. You should have seen all the geek engineers around that box at Cisco Live. They were just all googly-eyed over it. But switches are used in a network to what we call micro-segments. When we looked at Chapter 4, if you looked at it, micro-segmentation is the idea that every single host will be connected to an individual switch port, which should mean in a modern network that we never have collisions. There should not be any collisions in a modern network. The switches should be able to handle with buffers and with other items to ensure that there are no collisions. Now, when collisions start taking place on modern networks, it's typically a device has gone bad, that you've exceeded the limitations, or that you've exceeded the limit of a cable run or something of that nature. So those are types of things that, or even a port on a switch could go bad. But a switch is really just a computer, a specialized computer that sits down and has a boot just like anybody else. In this particular case, this is the boot environment variable. This is useful on a switch that has a large enough flash to hold multiple iOS images. Now, the iOS, if you will remember, is the Internet Working Operating System. The iOS is the OS or operating system on Cisco devices. By the way, a big thing at Cisco Live was the idea of an intelligent iOS or intelligent network, a network that can make decisions for you without the using policies that you've set, instead of having the administrator have to make all the choices when you bring a device online. So kind of neat there. Be interested to see where it goes and how complicated it gets. But in this case, you've got a switch that could hold more than one iOS image. And then the way this is useful is, let's imagine we put in a new image. We've got room for the old image and the new image. We want to boot the switch on the new image and see if everything's going to work correctly before we delete the old image. Well, we can go in and say boot system flash, this is the storage device, colon, this is a folder, this path to the file system, and then the file name. So this would boot, the next time S1 booted, it would boot the image, this K9-152SE.fin image. So in the real world, the best use of the boot system command is when we have multiple images and we want to pick which one we use. If it's not in there, typically it only boot the first one there. If you do have a crash, let's say your switch fails to load for some reason, there's multiple things you can do. One of the biggest thing at this point is just connect to the console, unplug the power. The switch doesn't have a power on it. And I will, this is something interesting I learned this last week that I had never thought about. I was looking at Cisco's hardened devices, so the devices that are used like on plant floors that are EMI protected, that can run in 0 degrees Celsius to 70 degrees Celsius with no additional heating or cooling, and looked at them, and none of them had a power cord. Every single one of them had power had to be hardwired into the device itself. And I was asking, you know, at first I found that strange, and I asked one of the engineers. I said, you know, why is this? And they said, well, what if you put it into an environment where there's a large amount of vibration? You don't want a power cable, because a power cable may work its way out. And all of a sudden, you know, light bulb went off. Duh. You know, why didn't I think of that? So that's kind of neat. But on a switch, we don't have a power button because they did not want an easy way for someone to turn a switch on and off. They wanted it to be, you had to pull the power cord. So if you do have need to recover from a clock crash, you pull the power cord, plug it in, hold down the mode button, and then it will boot into a bootloader and then you have to walk through and do a sequence of commands to make things work. If your splash is actually deleted and you actually lose your iOS image on a switch, it is a pain to recover because you have to end up ex-modeming or doing a couple other things to make it work. But it is possible. It is possible to do that. Here's what I always tell students: green is good, orange is bad. That's kind of a joke, but it's true. The LEDs on a switch, when you look at a system LED, I can't tell you the number of times students would be like, well, I can't ping. I'd walk over and there'd be no power on the switch, and I'd be like, well, your switch is not plugged in. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, it doesn't work very well without it being plugged in. But you see a series here. You've got system light, you've got the redundant power supply, you've got statistics that you can use to look at the mode, or the duplex mode and the statistics, the speed, and if PoE is available on a particular port, and if it is on. Now, what PoE is used for, or power over Ethernet, it is used to power things such as Cisco phones or IP phones. It's used to power wireless access points, wireless cameras, wireless IP cameras, wireless sensors, or not wireless sensors, but sensors that you can put in that need power. Now, it used to be, back in the day, there were two standards for PoE. Cisco supported one that didn't end up being the major standard. Now Cisco supports the major standard, and still many times supports the older standard depending on what device you buy. But be aware that if you need, here's the key thing to think about. If you're being asked by your boss to buy new switches, and you look at the price difference between a PoE switch and a non-PoE switch, and at this moment in time you're not, let's say for whatever reason you're not running IP telephony, you're not running IP phones, you're not running IP surveillance cameras that would need PoE, but you think you might in the next 6 months to a year, you're better off buying PoE. Otherwise, you're going to have to put in power injectors and power to each one of those devices. So make sure you make that decision, because once you buy a switch that does not have PoE, you're not going to add it to the switch. It's one of those things that you had to buy it with support for it. Now, having said that, you could get a chassis switch and change an entire blade out, but that's going to be ridiculously expensive too if you go from PoE to non-PoE, or non-PoE to PoE. So how do we connect to a switch? Well, we do it with a console cable. Now I'm going to show you, oops, I hit the wrong thing. I'm going to show you, oh, y'all going to shoot me. I'm going to show you in Packet Tracer. Sorry, folks. I accidentally closed the whole thing. Okay, now is when we need the music because I blew it. Aha! I'm back. Okay. How important is it to teach all the models of switches? It's not. It's not extremely important. I think the big thing to talk to them about is to make sure they understand that a switch can be fixed or modular, and I think that's a very important thing to talk about. You know, typically we look at, it's not really discussed in this chapter, but the concept of core distribution access layer switches, and how access layer switches are typically fixed switches, like, you know, 2960s, 3750s, 38, those types of things. And then, you know, as you get towards the core, you're looking more at modular switches that you can switch things out. It's not important that they understand completely what the actual every switch available out there is, not at the CCNA level. Now, if you get into something like some of the other certifications that Cisco has, they do have some certs that require you to be more of a salesperson / no sales, and so I'd be aware of that those certifications, but not for the CCNA. It's not that big a deal. All right, so I'm going to pull out a PC here. And now, one of the things, folks, I want you to be aware of, this is Packet Tracer, and we've had many labs where you had to connect things. So here's, you can go in and you can take an Ethernet or a straight-through cable, and I'm going to connect to 0, 1. And then I'm going to actually, this is a console cable. Now, I know this is a fake, but I'm going to act like I'm connected to RS-232, and I'm going to go to the switch and connect to the console. That'd be on the back of the switch. And then on your machine, you would actually go to a terminal emulation program set 9600 8N1 with no flow control. Now, flow control is usually set X on, X off on most PCs. If you're using a USB to serial connector, that can cause problems. So you can do that, and you'll notice now I'm connected to the console of the switch. Now, there's a lab that we had that was using TerraTerm to connect. I think it was an actually intro. Be aware most of us use PuTTY in the real world this day and age. But that is the console cable going from the PCs, either USB or serial connection down to the console on the switch itself. Once you get in, you're going to do some basic configuration. One is host, and they don't even show this here because we've pretty much already shown how to do this. Has Cisco talked about moving away from the RJ45? Yes, they have. In fact, you can buy, see if I got one here on my desk. I got one here somewhere. But basically, it's a mini USB. Okay, it's in the lab. But there's a mini USB connector that has, and many times you'll actually see it. Let me see if I can find a picture of one.
I know there's one in the CCNA 1 curriculum, the network.
Yeah, there is. I don't know.
Way back there.
Yeah, I don't know either, but there's a mini Cisco mini USB. And there's the driver for it. We actually can download the. Oh, all I'm getting software. Images. There we go. Okay. So here's mini USB. Basically, it's a USB to a mini connection, and your switch, and has a console port. Here's one thing that confuses a lot of people. Like, here's a 2960S with that console port. You can either be connected RJ45 or USB. It's not two ports. It's just one. But that is starting to take the place. Yeah, on switches. Yeah, this is a 2960S right here that does have it. So yes, there are switches out there. Yeah. On the more expensive switches, they've already got the USB console on it. The low-end access level switches, they have not gone over and started putting that into everything yet. I would figure in the next couple iterations, you would see them actually going in and saying every single switch they put out, or every single device they would put out, would have that that connection on it. You know, the other problem you've got is you don't have serial connections anymore on your PCs, especially laptops. So you end up with the inability. You have to use a USB to serial anyway. Yeah. So that becomes a pain, especially if the driver doesn't work right. All right. So yeah, hopefully we will get moved to that. Now you'll notice they didn't even teach you here because they expect you from intro to already know how to do host names, how to do enable secret passwords, and how to do line console passwords, how to do VQI passwords, how to set a banner, those things. What they do here is they want to talk to you about, Patrick, you got a question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you.
So one question I had is, do you know if they're going to improve driver support for Windows? The reason I ask that is because, like, you have to go in and basically manually, it's about a 4-step process to get the Cisco USB driver to work.
It's horrible.
The console driver works just fine, but to get the USB driver to work is a
this thing right here.
I have to go, I have to go and do that for my students most of the time because I can't figure it out.
Yep. Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, it is beyond heinous. I don't know that they've got any plans to make it any better. Here's the other thing that's kind of interesting. If we do look at, we look at this, if you look, I mean, that's not even the USB standard anymore, No. Are they going to go to the new USB Type-C? Which would be nice, but then there's not a lot of stuff going. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going to that, but that's not the standard either. So I don't know what they're going to do. But it definitely is not something that's for the faint of heart.
That picture right there.
Yep, that's it.
So in order to get that piece to work, you have to right-click on it, and then you have to choose install driver, and you have to choose manually select, and you have to select from a list of drivers, and this is if you've already put the software
install the
so
driver.
you can get to it.
Yeah, you got to install the driver first. The other thing I'll teach students that I don't know if you did, but you see how it says COM3? Those things will move. Even like USB to serial adapters will move from, if you plug in one USB port versus a different port, they'll change COMs. So I hard set the COM on that. You can go in and tell it has to be COM1, COM3, whatever. That way you know every time you go into PuTTY, it's using the same COM port. But that's something I do too. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't know. It's not an easy thing to do right now. So yeah, because it does move, which is bad.
Has anybody tested it on Windows 10 yet? I have not done that.
I have not yet. Because to be quite honest with you, a lot of the stuff that I use in the Cisco Academy, everything I use in the Academy uses the RJ45. So I just carry one of those around in my bag. And you know, it works. So the USB to serial adapter I've got works in Windows 10. I know that. So I can try it. I'll try it sometime next week or tomorrow. Probably tomorrow afternoon I could try it.
I'm shifting my lab over to Windows 10 this summer, so I need to make sure that it works before I do all that.
Check this out. This is something I hadn't seen before. That's a new one to me, a USB to RJ45.
They must have the controller chip in that little
Yep,
portion.
exactly, directly to it. Kind of nice, but yeah. I don't disagree with you. It's pain, no doubt. So wish I had a better answer for you, but I will. I know Brian has used it on his once, used the USB, so I know it will work. I just don't know how well it works. So the other problem we're going to have is when you look at the classroom, the way we set up our classroom is we use patch panels to do jumps between different racks. So how do we do, if it's not RJ45, how do we connect, you know, USB patch panels? What do we do? So I don't know, man, that's hoping USB to serial is what we're going to do. So we know that works. So you see here, we're going to configure an SVI. This is a switched virtual interface. In this case, you remember I told you in Intro to Networks, never use VLAN 1 for your management. Here they're giving you interface VLAN 99. I wouldn't use that either because everything in Cisco uses that for in the CCNA anyway. But it's interface VLAN 99, which creates that VLAN, and then you do an IP address on it, and then no shutdown. And then obviously you got to do a copy run start or do WR, either of those. And that will give you a management interface. Now, you'd be amazed the number of times, even the last 2 weeks ago in the Skills USA contest, students would do this portion, but they would not configure the default gateway. And then that switch couldn't get out for me to be able to SSH to it or do whatever I needed to do. The default gateway is the gateway of the switch or of the router interface that's closest to the switch. So make sure you set that, and that is a global config. Okay. Notice this is global and then goes into interface, and then you set this on down. And then verify your configuration with a show IP int brief and see that you've got your interface up. You see it's up down because there's no ports plugged in to bring it up yet. So and that will actually bring it up when you bring up the ports up. That's a lab inside of NetLabs. By the way, real quick here, when you're doing a NetLab, so for instance, configuring a switch management address, oops, that was wrong. When you're doing a lab inside of NetLabs, let me log in real quick. And I've got this set up right here, VLAN tuning, I got this. And when you're doing one in here, make sure you use the lab content from in here, inside of the lab itself, because it is changed to work with the NetLab system. So I know there's been some confusion on that, but make sure when you're inside of the lab and you're wanting to do the lab, click on Show Lab Content, and that will show your lab content so that you can actually go through. You can still use the Word document from inside the class to put in your answers, but follow the directions in that Show Lab Content. Otherwise, you may end up with problems because the lab will not map directly to what's inside of NetLabs. And they've all been rewritten to be used in NetLabs like that. So please do that.
Kelly, I had a quick question about that.
Sure, Chris.
When I'm setting up a lab, in the 10 minutes that it takes for it to warm up, I like
Yep.
going through the PDF and kind of writing out what my config's going to be in a text document, and then I can just paste in configs afterwards. Is
That's
there
cool.
anywhere other than that show lab content section? Because I can't actually get to that in the 10 minutes that it takes to warm up. So if it
Okay, very good question. Very good question. Here's what you can do. If you go in and say scheduler, okay, and you want to reserve, let's say I'm doing it for myself, you would have reserved time for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can click here and then go to your class, and you notice I got like 10 billion classes here. Here's the class. I'm just going to pick somebody. Look over here on the right-hand side. Here's all the lab documents.
Awesome. There we go.
So you can actually, if you wanted to, you could go in and download all the lab documents beforehand, put them in a folder, and you've got all these documents so you can start doing those things. Then you can just dump your configs in using copy-paste. So see, here's every bit of them that have been designed and changed for NetLabs.
Gotcha.
So just go to scheduler, and then on that right-hand side, again, you'll have your own. On the right-hand side, it will show you the lab documents right here.
Perfect.
Okay. Good question. Very good question. Now we'll save you some time. Also, do be aware it does take 10 minutes for it to boot up, and then the last 10 minutes of any reservation are used to turn it off. Is that list the 135-hour semester course? That's 135 hours is a lot of hours. These courses are designed to be 70 hours a piece. The problem is the students many times have to take more than 70 hours to do the course, especially depending on how strong they are. What I would do, to be quite honest with you, is you've got, oh, it's high school kids? Yeah. Oh, yeah. If it's high school kids, most definitely. Yeah. If it's high school, I strongly recommend that you just try to get them through those labs because those labs are good. You've also got some labs, obviously, that are not listed in NetLabs that are just your written labs that you can use them to do, work on their writing skills because, quite honestly, in our jobs today, the ability to communicate and the ability to do things like, right now I'm going through the process of doing bids and trying to do requisitions and travel forms and everything else. So that's, as big a part of your job as anything else. So, yeah, for high school, that'd definitely be this. There are more, yes, there are definitely more, because if you look on the course index and look at the lab index, like, do we really need a map, mapping the internet, basic router? See, like, this is 1146 is really the first NetLabs lab. So there's a couple labs here, like these activities that I don't really have you do. I'm just having you do the hands-on labs, pretty much. And so how much does this cost? See, there's the thing. Here's an activity talking about things that you can do. And this is a lab that's not really, it's a written lab. So it's not a hands-on lab. So you have to kind of go through and decide what you want to do with those and where you think they'll be useful for your students. Course shell, yes, I am working on it. In fact, I hope, and I may be wrong, folks, but I hope that I actually have already been able to get yours done. I will definitely get you a course shell paper. Send me an email. If I don't have it done already, I'll check it and make sure, but pretty sure I've got most of this one done. I got one for intro that's done too, so I can share that one with you. Save you a lot of time. All right, communication. There's actually one more duplex here called Simplex. Yeah, I got one for V6 for intro, trust me. Yeah, I somehow got stuck doing V6 for intro and for routing switch essentials, and it looks like I'm gonna get stuck doing the 6 for connecting and scaling, so I'm gonna get to build all of them. But we got full duplex, which is, here's how I always describe this, and I think that my students kind of like it. If you've ever watched the National Geographic Channel, here's half duplex. It's always that show on when they're on Mount Everest, and it's always a British dude. Base camp to camp 2, over, and I'm a Southerner, okay? I have no ability to do accents. And, over, why are they saying over? Because on a walkie-talkie, you can either send or receive. Can't do both at the same time. Full duplex, like a cell phone, you can send and receive simultaneously. And what this comes down to is In a half duplex, the send on one side is connected to the receive on the other and vice versa. Whereas in a full duplex, you've got a send channel going to a receive and then a send channel going to a receive. All right. There's one other type called simplex that they don't even talk about, which is just sending only. And that's like the old radio towers. In a full duplex network, you should not have collisions because of the fact that you've got separate channels. In half duplex, you can have collisions. Now we're going to configure our switch ports. You can go into the port itself and give it its duplex and speed. You can leave it at auto, but I'll be honest with you, I've had tons of trouble in the real world with auto being set on auto, so I like to hard set mine on the switch side. And this is a little what they call a Quizlet or one of the syntax checkers that lets you put it in. This you have to type in the full information or it won't work. So teach your students that and they'll get frustrated very, very quickly. Yeah, I don't like using auto duplex. Now auto MDX, typically what happens when you put like devices together, you need to use a crossover cable. In this current state of affairs, most of our stuff, you can put a straight through cable between two switches and it will auto cross using MDIX or auto MDIX. And so it's enabled on 2960 and higher, but it's not available on 2950 and 3550. So I still teach students that typically between switches we want to put a crossover cable. That's definitely what I teach them for the CCNA, that you want to use that crossover cable there. Same thing if it's between two routers or two PCs. And then we can verify our switch ports, and that's the show interfaces and the interface ID. You can do a show startup config and show running config, which I don't like as actual switch verification or switch troubleshooting port commands. We've got show MAC address table, show MAC table. We've got show flash, show version, show IPnt brief. Use that one a great deal. Okay, here we go, show running config, and it shows you what modes are in. Don't forget your range command. Everyone knows that, right? Or do I need to show it to you real quickly? Everybody know the range command?
I'm good on it.
I'll show it just real quickly, just so you got a good idea. So let's imagine I've got 24 ports. I want to set them all to the same. I can go config T. I can go interface range FA0-1 space dot 24. And now you'll see I can do duplex full speed 100 auto. Let's see, it's got auto in it. Nope, doesn't have auto MDX. Yep, MDX, it must be MDX auto. Yep, auto. Now I'm going to do show run, and you'll see that all of those commands are applied to every single one of the interfaces at once. Okay, this is also a great way to say I'm going to shut down all unused ports, so I can actually shut down every port, and then say, okay, now I'm going to change my range, interface range FA01 to 4, and do a no shut because that's the only 4 that I want to be used. And now obviously the some of those ports don't have anything in them, but that would allow only those ports to be up and running. So you're able to do that. So, all right. Any questions on that for the range command? Because that saved you a bunch of time.
Yes.
Shoot.
Quick question there. So, is there anything in the CLI where you can sort of do like a conditional set, meaning like
yes.
If the ports are active, then don't shut them down?
Yeah, you can do some programming to make that happen. You can do, oh golly, what's the name of that thing?
Not in CCNA, but
yeah, not in the CCNA. It's there, but it's golly, help me out, Chris. What's the name of that? Say what?
I was listening to a podcast on it last week, and it was all way further than I got into, and I don't even remember the name of it.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
Starts with a T. Sorry, I've been hit by a truck. Right now they're call it ACI. you can do it. I think you can do it now with Python, and I'll have to look it up. I'm sorry, but there is a way to do it. There is a it's in the CCMP.
Yeah, like the reason
TCL. That's it. Found it. Woohoo!
The reason I asked was because, like, with Windows and PowerShell, and Linux with Terminal, you can query statuses, and then when you query the statuses, then you can use those statuses to set.
Here it is. It's iOS scripting with TCL. So it's a little scripting tool you can use, and you can do all types of stuff with it. So yes, you can do it. It's beyond the scope of this, but it is possible to do it, definitely. Some other cool things, I will show you this, it's kind of neat. If you're inside of here, now, and it may not be supported on Packet Tracer, but on real gear, you can do things like interface, range, and then do FA 01, comma, FA 03, and it will pull up, just do those. So there are things you can do in the range command to kind of, if you don't want to use all 24 or you don't want to use consecutive, you can do different things with the range command. But the TCL scripting, and now I'm pretty sure they've got Python hooking into ACI, which is letting them do some things there.
Most people use Ansible for that, which is a Python language, and it works really well.
You use what, Chris?
It's called Ansible. It's a kind of like jQuery is to JavaScript. It's a language that's written in Python that's used for any kind of command line driven kind of thing. So Juniper uses it a lot. Cisco uses it a lot.
Cool. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've got to work more on is programming and the ability to do. It's kind of funny because I don't do a lot of it because I don't do a large amount of stuff in a production environment where I have to run commands over and over and over. And I try to teach the students the commands because they see the commands on the on the test. But it's something they definitely need. And there's actually a Python class coming to the Cisco Academy. So it's coming out, it'll be into this year, maybe first of next year. So it's one of those things that's coming, and it is a huge item that was, again, everything you talked about. There's an entire DevNet section in the at Cisco Live that was nothing but basically programming on Cisco devices. So, any other questions, Patrick? Okay, so if we look at our interfaces, show IPNet brief or just show interface up. The first up is your physical layer connectivity, so your keep alives. The second is your layer 2 information. So you cannot have a down up. You can have an up down, which means you're getting a carrier sense, but you may have a layer 2 issue of some sort. Typically, though, especially just on switches, you get up or down for the most part. It's more typical on a router to have an up down where you say you've got frame relay on one side and PPP on another, or some other configuration that's causing an issue there. You can also look in here and look for runts. That's any frame that's less than 64 bytes. Giants. This can happen definitely in our data centers where we've turned on jumbo frames on our VMware servers or on our servers and forgot to turn on jumbo frames on the switch itself, and so you get giants. CRC errors, input errors, so all of these things you can look at. Collisions. If you're seeing a lot of collisions and a lot of issues here, interface resets, that's probably something wrong with your duplex settings. And if you're getting late collisions, that's typically because you've exceeded the length runs on a certain type of media. Again, CRC errors are typically also damaged either cables or media, K-wire or something of that nature, maybe noise coming on or those. Okay. So network layer issues really do show interface. Is it up? If it's yes, are there EMIs? Are you getting resets? Are you seeing errors? If there are, then you can go figure it out. If it is not up, is it plugged in? Many times, something as simple as it's supposed to be in port 01 and it's in 10 for whatever reason. Check cables for damage. Verify the speed and duplex are set on both sides. Verify that you have done a no-shut command on it, just in case someone has shut them down. By the way, that is a key difference between a router and a switch. All switch ports are by default turned on, whereas all router ports are shut down administratively. Switch ports are on by default. So from a security standpoint, you need to shut down unused ports. Another security item we need to talk about is when I'm accessing a switch remotely. If you telnet, you might as well be handing people your username and passwords. Telnet sends everything in clear text using TCP port 23. We want to be using SSH. SSH uses TCP port 22, and it sends the information encrypted. And so you don't have to worry about information being captured. Now, this is what we're showing here, capturing a Wireshark session, and you can actually see Bob, and the password is Cisco in class. So you've got the username and you've got the passwords. But if it's SSH and you capture it, all you're going to get is the encrypted information that goes through. So we need to set up encryption. To support encryption on your devices, you need a K9 image, which is an image that supports encryption. The United States of America considers encryption a weapon. So therefore, there are certain countries that K9 images cannot be sent to. In fact, when you download a K9 image off of Cisco's site, they will many times ask you to agree that you are not giving this image to certain places. And so that is something to keep in mind as you work with these images. So how do we configure SSH? Well, first off, we've got to have a management IP address on the switch because we've got to be able to get to it. So we've done that. We set our domain name, so that's the first thing, IP domain name something. This is because that's used as a seed to create the key. We do a crypto key generate RSA to create a public-private key pair, all right? And then you set a modulus, and that's how big it is. Now, I will warn you, be careful how big you set this modulus, because sometimes it can take a while for it to generate. I once locked up a PIX firewall when I tried to do a large modulus, little PIX 505, doing a large modulus, and you quit routing traffic for about 3 minutes, 4 minutes while it was doing its modulus. Not a good day. But you then create a local username. Okay, so username something, secret, CCNA, or some password. Obviously, I wouldn't use that, but you go to your V2I lines and you change the transport input to SSH. Now, quick warning here. By default on 15.0, the V2I lines are set to transport input none. So if you're not careful, there's nothing here and you won't be able to telnet or SSH. So make sure you go in here and set transport input SSH, and make sure you put login local. If you don't put login local, it will not reference this local user database for your usernames. Now, there's all different ways of doing this. You can log in TACUS, log in all types of things down the road, but for CCNA, we're just going to do local. Then you can set your SSH version, and lo and behold, you can now SSH using PuTTY, so you can go in and set it up. So here you've got them just going through the process here. At the contest 2 weeks ago, we had so many students forget to do this, transport input SSH, and even more of them forgot to put login local. They put login, they didn't put local. And so the username password that we had asked them to put in would not work, and therefore they did not get points for SSH, even though technically they had SSH working. They did not have the ability to log in with SSH working.
Sir, I have a question.
Shoot.
How do I see my public key?
Okay. The public key, when you connect with SSH, it will ask you if you want to download that key locally, and then that would be stored in the PuTTY inside of PuTTY.
Okay.
That's how you can see the public key. The private key, you're not going to be able to see at all.
Right.
You also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you can run the show run command, and the key will be, the public key will be sitting in the running config.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir.
That depends on the iOS version, but that is also possible. I've seen that before too. Any other questions? Folks, I'm going to tell you it is extremely important that your students know how to do this right here because it's going to show up somewhere very important. I'll leave it at that. Okay. How do we verify it? Well, here's PuTTY going in. You can also do show SSH, and it will show you show IP SSH, and it will show you who's connected, what type of encryption they're using, and what the username is of that user. So I'm going to try something real quick. So Sorry, folks. I'll be right back. I'm checking something on the. All right, there we go. I'm trying. Here we go. All right, so you were asking about how to see your public key.
Mm-hmm.
The command is show. Where is that? Show crypto key my pub key RSA.
Oh,
so if it's not being displayed, it shows you the key name. You'll notice here. Here's why you've got to have the domain name set, because it gives you the host name plus the domain name is used as the key name to help with the seed. And then here is the key data. So there's your public key that was made via using a 1024 modulus.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the command: show crypto key my pub key RSA. So,
thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I knew there was a way to do it. I just couldn't remember all the command, but I knew. Mm-hmm. And I have seen it again in some versions of the iOS that actually will show up. You know, come to think of it, I think that's on the ASA. It shows up on the ASA. Mm-hmm. So how do we secure unused ports? We've secured our connection to the DTY lines. We're going to shut down all unused ports. I will tell you, one of the big problems I saw last week or 2 weeks ago in the competition was the following. Students would go in here, okay? They said shut down all the ports, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to, I'm going to listen. I'm going to do exactly what they asked me to do. I'm going to go in here and hit, okay, so config T, int range, and they do FA01. It's a 24-port switch because that's what's on the front, right? And then they do a shut, and then they turn back on the ones that they needed. But watch this, show IP int brief. Look what they forgot to do.
Gigabit.
Yep, they forgot to shut down administratively the gigabit ports, and we were not using those. So many students missed points on that because they didn't shut down those. Now, the thing is, that's a vector that someone could just plug a machine in and immediately get access, and they're in your network on whatever VLAN those are in. So make sure your students realize if you're asked to shut down ports, shut down all the ports, if it says unused. And that could be something on a certification test where you're doing a packet tracer or some type of, it's not really a packet tracer, but some type of simulation. They ask you to do it, you don't do it, and you lose points, which would be very bad. The last security item we're going to talk about in this chapter is what's called port security. What you want to do is you want to make sure that if you've got this switch set up, okay, and you bring in a PC and you've got your PC connected to a certain port. All right, so I'm going to actually connect this to port 1. Okay, so my fast Ethernet to port 1. Okay, and I'm going to go turn port 1 back on. So let's go in here and go int FA01. I'm going to do no shut. All right, I'm going to do speed 100. I'm going to duplex it full. This is something you don't know yet, but I'm going to do a spanning tree port fast. You'll learn about that as we move along. Port fast, okay. And then it's already on VLAN 1. So now I'm going to do show IP int brief. Should see that port 1 is down. Don't know why that is. I go look. We got the wrong type of cable. Copper straight. So that's how you delete a link. You click there. So let's do straight through again. Copper straight.
It might just be packet tracer being slow.
Yeah, I believe it is. Either way, I want to make sure that this port can only allow that one host on it. Now, I can set up port security. And the way I do that is I have to first turn on port security. And it says this is a dynamic port. So I got to do switch port, access, VLAN 1. I'm just going to put it in VLAN 1. That's because it was running DTP So I have to turn that off first. So the port security. Shut. No shut. All right, now it should come up. All right, I'm done with Packet Tracer. I'll go hit schedule and make a why I'm gonna talk about it, because I want real things.
By the way, that's never happened to me in my class.
No, never.
Had that problem.
No. I'm also running a beta version of Packet Tracer. I'm running a version that's being tested, so that could be part of it. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that if someone walks into your room or into a building and unplugs one machine and tries to plug in their hacker box, it's going to immediately do something to either let you know about it or to shut that port down. That's called port security. And what you can do is you can go in and you can set port security, and you can statically say these MAC addresses or this MAC address only is allowed in this port. Or you can let it do dynamic, which they're learned and stored in the table until the switch is reset. Or you can do this thing called sticky MAC, which is it's learned and then stored and added to the running config. So they can actually, it does the static secure, but it learns it for you and then you save it. Sticky is probably the easiest because you don't have to go in and type the MAC addresses for every device. You just have to make sure that that device that you want is plugged in that port when it learns the MAC addresses. There's some problems with port security you need to be careful of, especially in your classrooms. If you're running on your classroom PCs, let's say VMware Workstation, or you're running anything, VirtualBox, anything that runs and makes virtual MAC addresses, you're going to have more than one MAC address on that port. So if you set it to be port security maximum of 1 and say sticky, well, the PC's MAC address will be the only one allowed, and then the other virtual machine MAC addresses will be causing the port to go whatever, protect or shut down or whatever you said is the mode. So be aware of that with port security. In a corporate environment, though, we don't have to worry about that as much because we usually have one PC connected. But you also, I mean, I don't know about you, but even in a corporate environment, I've got VMware loaded on my box here, and I boot different machines all the time. Now, it does depend on how you've set up your VMware to work. And it's, it can be that you've got them sandboxed, you've got them sharing the MAC address, etc. If you've got them actually completely accessing the NIC like it was another NIC, you'll have a virtual MAC address that's there. And Patrick asked, what age group are the kids at schools? It's everything from high school up to universities. So we have we have secondary and post-secondary competitions. So we have both.
Quick story to add in, at Cisco Live last year, I listened in on a security conference, and they were talking about sticky MAC addresses, and they had a spot where they had Cisco IP phones, and then they had a host on the other side. So they set the maximum MAC addresses to 2, but turns out when CDP, Cisco Discovery Protocol, runs its thing, it does not use the MAC address of the phone. It actually runs a different MAC address so that it lets other devices know that it's CDP. So as soon as CDP started up on the phone and then that computer ran through, it shut off the port and nothing worked. So
and what it was is the phone has a built-in switch on it.
Yes.
The phone has a built-in switch on it, and that switch in the phone has its own MAC address, and that's the MAC address used by CDP. And you end up with, all of a sudden, whatever you've set, which, by the way, that is interesting. We'll look at what can you set on the interface. Well, you've got 3 different modes. You can do a protect. So when the number of MAC addresses is reached, anything from unknown addresses are dropped until more secure addresses are opened up. Okay. So it will not forward any additional traffic on protect, and it will not, but there's no notification sent either. So this would have been one of the worst things because 2 of the devices would have worked, the 3rd would not have worked, and you would not have known about it, other than your user calling you going, it ain't working. Restrict is when that reaches the limit, packets unknown address are dropped. Again, the difference between protect and restrict is that there's a notification, okay? And then shutdown is shutdown. Down it goes. Which honestly, if I'm running port security, I'm probably going to use shutdown because I want to know when something happens. I want to know that that port has been violated. Okay. So let's look here. I'm on a real switch now, thank goodness. All right. So I'm going to do a show IP Hold on a second. Now, can't do show IP brief. And we'll see that port 05 is the one that's got my PC on it. So I'm going to go int FA05. I'm going to do switch port security. All right, that turns it on. So it says dynamic, so you can't do it. So I'm going to do switch port access VLAN, switch port mode access, switch port mode access. That's probably why it wouldn't work before, because my dumb self forgot to do that. Now we do this port security. So port security is on. And then I'm going to do switch port security maximum. Let's just say 3 in this case. I just pulled that out. Switch port security violation mode of shutdown. All right. And then switch port security MAC address. And I use the tab for everything because I'm lazy. MAC address sticky. Now I'm going to do show port security. You will see that port security is turned on in FA01. I have 3 maximum MAC addresses, okay, and the action is shutdown, okay. Now, here's something that's kind of interesting. If I do no switch port security, okay, and then try to run the do show port security command, look, nothing's happening. I had so many students do this. I'm going to show you do show run. I had so many students in the competition, and so many people tend to do this. They put in, it's shut down, I put it on the wrong port beside. They put in the correct commands, okay, except for if you don't put in that switch port security, it's not on by default. It's not on at all. So you've got to go in and do switch port security. Okay. Now, if I had actually put it on FA05 instead of 1, it would have showed it correctly. So switch port security. Got a question? Thanks.
Yeah. So the whether or not switch port security is enabled, does that show up in any specific place?
Yes. If you've got it enabled, it will show up when you do a do show run or do a show run. But also, you will know if you do a do show port security and get nothing, then that tells you it's not been turned on. See, right now it's on because you can see this. If you get nothing here, that means it hasn't been turned on at all. So, and also
where does it show up in the main config?
Under the interface itself. Where's it at? Should be in there. I thought I put it in there.
Yeah, it's right there in the 3rd line.
Yep, there it is. And the only reason it's in the third, typically it's the very first thing, but because I put it in later, it ended up, it's usually right under switch port mode access. Let's see this. Let me go back to int 5. Int FA05. Switch port security, switch port security. Max 3. Not 23. Violation, shutdown. And by the way, here's the 3 modes again. You got protect, restrict, and shutdown. Switch port security, MAC address, sticky. And then, so if I do a do show run now, you should get under 05. Nope, it actually goes in 3rd. Okay, I was wrong, but there it is. So. But if that's not there, it doesn't matter what you do. It's not. You can put all the commands in right you want, but it's not going to work because it doesn't. Basically, switch port security activates port security on that port.
And just for the heck of it, can you turn it off again and then show us the config?
Yeah. No switch port. I should have piped that. No, all right. There. See the difference? Here's port 5. I turned it off on. Here's port 1 with it on.
So it's a per port setting, not a switch wide setting?
Correct. Correct. It is a per port setting. And now if you do a show port security, even though you've got the commands set up on 05, it's not going to show in this list. But if I do switch port security and then run the same command again, boom, it's in there. So you have to activate it on that port to make it work. And that command is what activates port security.
Are these policies typically done on every switch port at the same time, or?
Yes. Yeah, you do it with interface range command.
Okay.
You just do the interface range and put it on all 24 ports. And you know, the only place that you got to get funky again is like if let's say you're in the data center and you're connecting to your VMware servers, and they're going to have trunk ports that are running multiple servers and server traffic across. Then you've got to really be careful, and you're probably not going to use port security in those instances. This is more for ports that are connected on your wall that go to a switch that someone could walk in and plug a device in. So basically your access switch ports. Okay, any other questions? So by default, it is disabled, and there's they allow one secure address, and the violation mode is shut down and disabled sticky. But you can go in and change it. So switch port mode access, it does have to be an access port instead of a dynamic port. We'll learn about DTP later, but basically a port, if it's connected to another switch, switches have the ability to automatically create trunk ports. That's called dynamic trunking protocol, or DTP. You have to turn that off by making it switch port mode access. Then you can do switch port security, and that turns on port security, and then you set your addresses and your sticky. And then you can also set your violation mode if you so choose to do so. You can also do this, show port security, and do the interface, and it will show you whether or not sticky is actually turned on or not. So you can drill down in a more detailed fashion than just what we were doing. So you can actually get in here. So we could do Control C, do show int, do show port security. Can't type. FA05, int FA05. And you can see now that you've got, see it's enabled. And that will also show you whether or not it's enabled. So if I turn it off, you can do this command, it will show you whether or not it's enabled. So let's do this, let's do no switch port security and run the same command, and you'll see now, look at it. Now port security is disabled, even though the maximum address has been changed from the default, okay, and it's not working, okay, because it's disabled. Turn it back on. Oh, y'all know Control A takes you back to the beginning, Control E takes you to the end, and then now hit the same command again, and it's enabled again. So if the students had run this command or just run show port security, they would have seen that their port was not showing up, and it would have showed that they had not turned it on and not enabled it. Again, you can see it here, but if you turn it off, oops. You see 5 drops out because we turned it off on 5. So very common mistake people make. Very, very common. Okay. Here you can actually see where you've learned a sticky MAC address. So in other words, you plug the host in, and that host has sent a frame, and that frame has been received on the switch, and the source MAC address has been pulled into this port's information and set as a sticky address. You could do 10 more of these or 9 more of these before the port would use whatever violation mode you had. You can see here, secure dynamic, secure sticky. Okay, so it's basically dynamically learned or set to sticky. There's different ways of doing ports. Once, if you do have shutdown as the mode for your port security, it will go air disabled, and the port will actually be amber on the front. And if you do a show interface, it will show you that it is called disabled, so it's down. Okay, so FA018 is air disabled, and then the only way to bring that back up is to issue the shutdown command on it, and then the no shutdown command, and that will bring it back up once you fix the violation problem. Now, this could be somebody, you know, in their office. Let's say they bring in their home PC and connect it in, and they've knocked the port off, and then you know that because you get this notification, and then you can go and say, oh, so what did you hook into it? And they say, well, nothing. No, you hooked in something because it went air disabled, so what's going on? And that could be a violation of your security policy. You may have a security policy in your company that you do not allow anybody to connect devices onto the network. So that can be enforced with port security.
What if the switch lost power? Would that port be re-enabled?
Yes, that port would be re-enabled. And what happened to the MAC addresses would depend on what had happened before the switch lost power. So if it's dynamic MAC addresses, when the switch loses power, everything would be lost, all those would be lost. If it's sticky and you did do a copy run start before the power went off, the next time it booted up, all those addresses that had been learned would be still inside of the startup config. But as far as statuses, yeah, it would bounce them. It'd be the same as a shut, no shut.
So if I'm in a Mission Impossible hacking scheme and I need to get access, I can just kill the building power.
It's worth a
turn
try.
it back on.
It's worth a try, yeah. There may be easier ways to do things, but it's worth a try. I find it's easier just to buy a shirt that looks like it's from the telecom company and walk in and act like you're, or just put on a shirt that looks like you're the person that's taking care of the flowers for the building and say, hey, yeah, my name's so-and-so, I work for Bob's Florist, and my job's to, can you let me in? So just have a little cart with a bunch of flower stuff on it, and you're good to go. I've never thought about these things or anything.
Who doesn't love flowers? Come on now.
Exactly. All right, that's the end of Chapter 5, so I'm going to stop the recording and the sharing. And y'all can ask any questions you want as soon as I get everything kind of stopped.
I have one last question, sir.
Shoot, no problem.